Hello, I'm Lee Povey,
And I'm Steve Mellor.
and we are two high performers who have transitioned from the world of sport to business as high-performance executive and leadership coaches to those looking to take themselves and their companies to new heights,
The road to success can seem like a lonely one at times.
especially for a founder.
So we decided to form the Founders Catalyst, a show that provides the very support system necessary for founders, leaders, and high performers like you to receive the coaching, community, and catalyst required to ignite your journey.
To be clear, this is no place for fluffy content that only covers the highlights of achieving an ultimate goal.
Instead, our mission is to deliver the difficult conversations that most people may be afraid to have. The ones laced with truth, vulnerability,
And impactful insights from our first-hand experiences in the trenches with founders and leaders operating at the highest stakes.
You don't have to go it alone through the highs and lows of leadership and business ownership anymore.
Let us be the catalyst that you, your company, and your entire ecosystem need to excel in unprecedented ways.
This is the Founders Catalyst. Okay, we're piggybacking off another episode, part 2 of this notion of how will they cope without me. Actually sounds like a nighttime radio, like love session, doesn't it? When you think about it, you just hear that. It's just like someone's coming on the radio and saying, how will they cope without me? And then people are making their requests. People are making their requests based on...
I can see it already, Steve. You're sitting there going, how am I going to cope without Lee in my life? Like, once this podcast is ended, what am I going to do to the next one?
I'm gonna put with or without you on after we're done with this. Well, listen, if you are picking up this episode and for whatever reason you didn't listen to the last one, please do. It's important that you do. It supports everything that we're going into because we're covering the second part. We touched on this notion of, you know, our ability to relax and take breaks and how important that is to, again, when you're starting to think about how will folks exist without me, we do need to make that space to just simply recharge. And we went into great detail around that in the previous episode. So let's talk a little bit more now about how we empower the team. And again, I did shed a little bit of insight on this in the previous episode, and I want to kind of pick it up from there just because we have that shared experience of working with athletes. And we both said something in the vein of when you're working with the right kind of athlete, you know, typically our job as a coach back then was to tell them just to pull back and actually slow down. But for the athlete to get to that point mentally where they're so inspired, where they're so self-motivated, you suddenly as a coach go, well, something I've been doing in this environment is clearly working, to give them that feeling, if you will, of that's how they should be showing up and doing what they're doing. So I'm curious, just from when you think about your background and how you slowly got to the level you were at there in elite cycling, Lee, like, when did you start to get a sense that the athletes that you were working with were of this kind of headspace, of this kind of mindset? And what do you think your role was in that, in terms of getting them to that space?
I want to take a step back and just have a little thought and discussion about motivation and what it actually is.
Ooh, I like that.
So, my experience, my learning from reading the literature is you can't really motivate somebody. And I think it's a common misconception that it's the job of leaders and coaches to motivate other people. Instead, what I think you do is you create environments for them to thrive. And then you give opportunities for these people to find where they're going to thrive. Now, we've all seen it. You know, I've been around athletes where the motivation was clearly coming from the parents, for example. I can remember one very clearly. I was on the national junior team with this kid. We're at a training camp, and we'd done a really hard training session in the morning, track session. He then went out for a ride in the afternoon. He rode 90 miles. That's a long bike ride by yourself.
Yes, it
His
is.
dad was his coach, and his dad had put in his program he had to do 100 miles. This kid comes back. We have our evening meal at the camp. So he's trained twice in the day. I've only trained once. He's trained twice in the day. Big volume day of training. He was an endurance athlete. I'm a sprinter. I don't need as much volume. His dad rings him up. We're chilling after the meal, and he's getting dressed to go back on his bike. And I'm like, what are you doing, mate? He's like, my dad's just told me off. He looked at my data. I'd only done 90 miles. My training session is for 100. He's making me go out and do the extra 10 miles. How much longer do you think that kid lasted in the sport?
Not long. Not long.
Good kid, hard kid. I think it was 6 months later he'd quit because the motivation was coming from his dad, and the sport was almost a punishment because his dad was more invested in it than he was, and he was trying to please his dad. And we do that as kids, right? We try to please our parents.
Right.
But I saw it all the time in sport. The kids that did well were the ones where the parents stepped back and they were driven. They were like, I'm leading this, I want to do this. And if we then take that out into the business world, the best colleagues I've worked with are the ones, again, that are the most motivated. And they're not necessarily the smartest. They're not necessarily even the most capable, but they're motivated and they love what they're doing. And those people you can mold, and you can create environments for them to thrive. And often we'll employ people based on their resume, based on their intelligence, but we're not employing them based on how much does this person love this work and how invested are they in succeeding. And one thing I see at startups is you attract two types of people. You attract people that love that high pressure environment, that are motivated, they want to climb the ladder, they want to come and learn how to run businesses. Or you attract people that go, oh, working in startups is fun. And it's going to be fun. And like they do all of these, kooky bonuses and weird little benefits. And often in the startups I work with, we roll back the benefits because it kind of gets rid of those kind of people. And we just pay people more money, right? Just pay people more money. Don't worry about whether you're giving stipends for book clubs or something. Just pay them more money. And then employ for motivation rather than employing for resume.
Yep. So even though you said take a step back, I actually think you answered the initial question in that process too. Is that if this is an awareness of yours, and clearly it's been an awareness of yours for some time, I have to believe that you were creating spaces for those athletes to form accountability on their terms. And again, it mirrors my coaching style in so many ways. It's a shame we didn't know each other, mate, when we were both in sport. That would have been, I think we would have gotten along then just as well as we get along now. But the piece for me was always just, I always loved remembering what an athlete had previously told me that they wanted to achieve. I never forgot those things. And I think the athletes themselves almost assume that you can just say whatever you want when the coach says, what do you want to get out this season? Or, how fast do you want to go this year? But I love just simply, I didn't hold them accountable to that. I would just remind them of that. Just like, do you still want to do that? I think you told me 3 months ago, because right now you're not doing what is required to get there. So you let me know. Like if that's changed, if the goals change, you let me know, because then I have no reason to provide you this work that's necessary to get you there. And you can imagine most athletes would get pretty tail between their legs, pretty fed up when, smart ass Coach Steve is speaking to them this way. But for me, it was my way of just sort of saying, like, this is on you. Like, you set the destination here, and your motivation is going to get you there. And my job as your coach, as much as it may seem like I'm supposed to scream and yell at you when you don't do these things the way you said you were going to do them, it's smarter and it's more effective long term for me just to simply make you aware. Just make you aware that, hey, listen, You said you wanted to go here, and I'm explaining to you and encouraging you that this is what's required to get there. And then they have a decision to make. Do I want to take ownership in this moment, or do I want to dismiss ownership? It's that simple. Do I want to take ownership, or do I want to dismiss ownership? Do I want to take ownership, or do I want to make excuses? Which one is it going to be? And going all the way now forwards into where we are today in our work, those are the questions I love asking. Is just sort of being in that room with executives and leaders and just saying, like, guys, this is where you told me you wanted to get to 6 months ago. And I hear all the adversities. I hear all the problems. I hear all the things that we're working through right now. But has the goal changed? Has the goal changed? Because if it has, I should definitely know. And most of the time, the goal hasn't changed. I'm like, so what's the issue with the motivation then? Because that is, in fact, the issue. It's not that the goal is unattainable all of a sudden. It's just that we got to do a little bit of work here, reflect and say, how do we just find that motivation for where we're trying to get to again?
Yeah, I love that, Steve. We often see leaders trying to motivate through fear. Short term can be effective, not effective long term. People leave. Nobody really likes to be in a situation where they're afraid. So if I go into a startup and everybody's telling me they're afraid that they're going to lose their job, I know that immediately we've got to work on the way that goal setting is done. So let's move to goal setting. My view on goal setting is you want the person that you're working with to set as much of the goals as possible. And then your job as a leader is to make sure that they align with what the company needs. They are achievable and they're a stretch so that people don't get bored. And, you're getting the most out of that employee. I often see leaders, sports coaches telling their athletes, telling their staff, this is what I need you to do. And that negates the accountability part. And I love that you talked about that, right? What's the accountability for them? What are they owning? Ownership is such a great word. As an athlete, as an employee, what is it that you're owning that you're taking on? If you don't own it, it doesn't feel motivating to you. It's just something somebody's told you to do, rather than, why do you want to do this? Okay, so you come to me, we do our performance review, or, we do onboarding. What is it you want to achieve here? What is it that you want to achieve as an employee of this company? So if I take myself back, my first serious job in real estate, working for a large corporate company, I do the interview, and the guy said to me, what do you want to achieve? And I said to him, I want to be the youngest manager you've ever had. And he chuckled and he said, well, that was me. So you're telling me you think you're better than me? And I said, I don't know, but I'm willing to try and find out, because that seems like a fun goal to go for.
Yep.
And he loved it. And that's, part of the reason I got the job in the interview, because he's looking for somebody who's hungry and somebody who wants to really improve themselves. So again, when you're interviewing people, when you're setting up those initial talks after you've taken somebody on, what is it they're striving to do? Are they coming with a purpose? Are they walking into your company and saying, I want to own this company one day, or I want to own a part of this company, or I want to own this department one day? And what are you, Mr. Employer, going to do to provide the toolkit? And, if we think about sports coaching, that's what we're doing. We're providing the toolkit necessary for somebody to be the best version of themselves. We're providing the training they need. In my sport, track cycling, you might be providing the equipment. You might be providing the data that they need to be successful. And it's exactly the same in the work environment. Do I have the tools? Do I have the software that I need to be successful? Do I have the makeup? Are we in the right kind of market? Are we doing the things? So I personally find it much more motivating to have a goal that I really own. What is my goal? And how am I going to own that? And how am I going to achieve it? And then I love what you said about reflecting to people. How are you doing in relation to the goals that you shared with me? And are you taking ownership for it? Are you realizing where you are achieving and not achieving? And if you're not pulling your weight, did we set the wrong goal? Do you not want to do this goal anymore? And it's okay asking those questions, and people get afraid to ask those questions. I'll encourage people to say, do you want to work at this company anymore? Because if you don't, that's okay. I always think the role of a leader is to create more leaders. So how do I empower everybody else around me to be a leader, be that on the sports pitch, be that in the executive room? And that might mean that they leave me, but I'm getting the best out of that person. until the point they do leave me. And you know what? They'll leave me. They'll probably recommend other people to come and work at my company and say, that guy there, he really helped me become the best version of myself. You want to be great? Go work for him.
Right.
Or go work for her.
Yeah. And it's that notion of how do I set them up for success, right? It's something that leaders have to keep asking consistently. And just to go back to where we are with this episode, this notion of how will they cope without me, the question slowly evolves. You know, the answer to the question in many ways is just more questions, better questions, if you will. Because when you say, how will they cope without me, you're indicating that there's a coping. There's the best that they're going to do in your absence is cope, and it's just like. But here's the thing: like this is the beauty of this question: is it immediately highlights the many potential foundational issues that if you don't take care of those, then you will be asking that kind of question. You will fall into that trap as a founder, as an owner, as a leader, to where you're asking that question and almost assigning this sort of panic station approach when you're going to go away for a day or whatever it might be. And what we're saying here is if you answer that question with how can I motivate them? How can I get them to intrinsically set goals? How can I truly teach ownership through this work? And, I have this growth acronym that I use with my clients, and I won't go into the whole thing right now, but the O and the W is ownership and work. And I do that on purpose because it's my way of saying the work doesn't come before the ownership. And everybody tries, not everybody, but a lot of people try to throw work at people and say, hey, take ownership for this. It's no. What if you taught ownership and that person then was able to connect the right kind of work that was required for them to then go on and perform at their best, for them to deliver optimal results and optimal performance in your world? For me, it's like that's the beauty of this two-part episode that we've now created, is that the problem in that question is that you're acknowledging by asking that question that you have these foundational issues that aren't being addressed. And in doing so, by answering that question with these kind of questions, you're moving into action. You're moving into immediate change and cultural shift that can firstly set your people up for success, but secondly, for you as a founder, give you a sense of freedom that, goodness, like this is what it's about as a leader, to know that you can walk out of the room and know that it's not even noticed whether you were there because people are positioned to be successful.
Yeah. Okay, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. So the elephant in the room here is the founder. Yeah, buddy, you're the problem. I see this often in organizations, especially the type of organizations I work with. So my favorite type of organization I have two clients. Client one is the founder of a scale-up company. So they have a successful product or service, they're funded, and they're growing rapidly, and they need to understand leadership themselves, and they need to understand how to create more leadership in a company so that they can step back from doing most of the day-to-day stuff or a lot of the day-to-day stuff. Then my second type of client is us, middle-aged men that are going, I'm super successful, I've done everything, I've got the money, I've got the nice house, the flash car, but I'm not happy. How do I find fulfillment? So going back to client one, this kind of younger leader that's trying to figure it out and often is the problem but doesn't realize that they're the problem. And it's how does that founder step aside and empower everybody around them? So the first part of that is actually them realizing, oh, it's me. I'm the problem getting in the way, right?
I'm asking the question, how will they cope without me?
Exactly, right? And you position that really nicely, that kind of, how will they cope without me? Oh, I'm the problem. Because I'm immediately assuming that they can't cope without me. However, the issue actually isn't how will they cope without me. The issue is how will I cope?
There it is.
Because what happens is, and I see this in parents all the time. So I see this in my men's groups. I see this with friends of mine that are parents. And this is how I like to think of staff. And again, I don't want this to be patronizing. I just think it's a model to see them. I like to think of them as children, and I like to think of them as children from the point of view is that they are growing, and they have to have experiences that they grow from. And those experiences mean that they are going to have failures because they need the failures to learn how to be resilient, to take responsibility, and to have confidence that they can do it next time because they've learned how not to do it. The issue for founders is that they don't want people to have failures because they're scared that if they have failures, the company is going to fail. And they're not the same thing. Yep. So founders are going, I want no failures. I want no mistakes. Everything has to be perfect. Well, nothing will be. So that's the first thing you have to learn as a founder. Nothing's going to be perfect. There's going to be failures. Things are going to get messed up. You need to learn how to deal with that. That's when you call us. We come and hold your hand with that. And we support you with that. And it's getting comfortable and confident that you will make mistakes and the people around you make mistakes, and move into this analytical model of what can we learn from this rather than who do I need to blame. So we move away from blame, and you've said this a lot and I love it about you. It's this curiosity. What did I need to learn from this? And also, what can I keep letting go of? And how do I trust that somebody else is going to do this differently from me? However, it's still going to be very effective and it's going to get what the company needs. Because people aren't going to work the way that you want them to work. They're not going to work the way that you would do it. However, they might be just as effective as you, and they might even be more effective than you. And as a founder, you have so many hours in the day, and as we spoke about in the last episode, you have so much energy. And if you think you need to be responsible for everything, your company immediately has a limitation on how big it can ever get, because it can only be as big as what you can oversee. And you will find out you'll have a lot of employees that get burnt out because nobody wants somebody looking over their shoulder the whole time. We're looking for employees that are self-motivated. We're looking for employees, when you talk about ownership, not only do they want to take ownership, they want to come to you with new things. They want to take on more. They're coming to you and saying, how about we try this? How about we try that? That's the dream for us as leaders, people that are motivated to the point that they want to take on more, and they want to take on more ownership, and they're bringing ideas rather than needing to be told what to do. And for me, the biggest word around this is trust. It's trusting that you as the founder will be okay whatever happens. Even if your business fails. I've had founders say to me, my baby's sick right now. And I'm like, well, tell me more about that. And they're like, it feels like my baby's sick. My business is my baby and it's sick. I'm like, I get why it feels that way. I've experienced that myself. And it's not a sick kid. It's a business. And if the business fails, you will be okay. And if the business fails, your employees will be okay. Just as when I look at an employee that is no longer working for a business or hasn't worked out, and we let them go, I personally view that as a gift to the person, because if they're in a position that they cannot excel in, we're getting in the way of them finding something that they're going to be better at. So where employees sit there and go, oh, I'm really worried about firing this person, it's going to be horrible for them. Yes, there's going to be short-term discomfort for you and them. However, in my experience, what then happens is they know better what they should be doing or not doing, and the next role that they go and take is better for them than this role. And you know what you want out of your next team member more than you did before, so the next person that you employ is better. I'm just going to finish up with one little example of that myself. So when I had my real estate business, the scariest thing for me was when the secretary left. Now you might call them an admin assistant or a personal assistant. We used to call them secretaries. That's how old I am. And yeah, I know I don't look it, Steve. But the secretary would leave. I didn't know what she did. Or he did, right? I didn't know what their role was because I was too lazy to find it out. And because I was too full of self-importance. I don't do admin work, right? How arrogant that feels now, because I do a ton of admin work now. But what happened was, I had one leave and I had to learn a little bit more about the role to cover. Then I had another one leave and then I had to learn more about the role. By the time the third one had moved on, I'm like, oh, I know everything about this role now. I know what makes a good admin assistant. I know what I'm looking for. And then the fourth person I employed was by far the best person we had. And I wasn't afraid because I knew if they left, I could do their role. or I could teach my other team members to do their role, why we looked for somebody else. So I keep coming back to this trust, and I'm interested to hear from you, Steve. Like, what do you see about that, and what you've done to help leaders trust themselves more and to trust other people?
Yeah, start by trusting themselves for sure, as you say. I think the notion of trust is born out of awareness. You know, it's that willingness straight away to say, listen, I'm going to become more aware. You identified that about me in the sense of I am motivated and driven by curiosity as much as any other emotion that I have. And whenever I get a sense with a leader that they're simply not aware of themselves towards a specific issue, because typically any and every issue that a leader brings to me has something to do with another human being, another employee, a client, whatever it is. There's a relationship component in there typically. And then my question is just like, how do you get a greater awareness of yourself in this situation? Like, are you hearing this? Are you hearing this as yourself, or are you hearing this as the CEO that you are? You know, I've had a couple of clients as well who I've challenged multiple times. When I ask them a question and they answer it, I say, okay, I appreciate you answering that now as though I'm one of your employees or I'm one of your customers, but now I need you to answer it. I need you to answer it. I'm not a client. I'm not a customer. I am your coach, and I need you to tell me truthfully your response to this, because that's actually going to help you get truly aware of your perspective, your opinion on this particular situation, and how you maybe showed up and how this result came about. So from a trusting standpoint, it starts for me always with awareness and getting someone to be able to see from a truthful standpoint, am I seeing this the way that the situation is truly happening, or am I interpreting this to the way in which the situation is actually happening to me? Or am I putting this hat on, or this perspective, or this filter on that is preventing me from truly seeing what is going on here? And I think that speaks a lot to what this particular two-part episode's been about, is that when we forget to simply just show up as our truest self, as our most authentic self, as our optimal self, then it's really hard to lead effectively, to run a business effectively, because it's hard to build that trust in yourself. And the other part of this, in terms of the building of the trust in others, it's the setting the example, it's the setting the tone, it's the self-leadership part of this. It's why it always starts with the individual. It always starts with the leader first. And I'm so glad that you took us there off the back of what I was saying of this elephant in the room, and starting with the founder themselves, because the fact of the matter is, people are watching you. People are watching you. People are listening to you. People are paying attention to you, and you don't get to decide that. You don't have a say in that. You don't get to walk around with a sandwich board on that says, please don't pay attention to me. Like, people are going to watch you. People are going to watch you, and they're going to pay attention. And if they can see that you doubt yourself, if they can see that you're questioning your own decision making, they're going to see it, they're going to notice it, and it's going to be felt. And they're not going to have as much trust in you. It's why this work that we're talking about here is so powerful, is when you do instill ownership in others, you may even be able to have deeper, more vulnerable conversations with your people around the fact that you do in fact doubt yourself, that you do in fact question the decision that you're about to make. So it starts with you, and in that doubt, in those moments of questioning, you get to then share them with your people, and your people get to then look at you in the eye and say, I get it, I hear you, human to human, I get it. And now let's have a much more meaningful, powerful, effective conversation around exactly that, because I know you're about to leave for a week to go enjoy some time with your family, to bring it all the way back to where we started. And I want you to feel great about going away knowing that we are taking the burden of whatever this thing is that you maybe have some doubt or have this feeling of vulnerability towards.
Yeah. And it all comes back to trust. It all comes back to trusting that you can have difficult conversations. It all comes back to, when I think about the most powerful work I do with leaders and the work that I enjoy the most, it's the moment where somebody says to me, I haven't got it figured out, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, where I know they've gone from telling me what they think they should be saying and what they think I want to hear, to now we're having the honest conversation. I haven't got it figured out. And no one's got it all figured out. Like that's an absolute misconception. I have good ideas and you might think I have a good instinct here. You still don't know until you do it whether it's actually going to work or not. And being able to have those conversations, the word that kept coming up to me as you were talking was integrity and authenticity. So it's being in integrity with yourself and others and being authentic. And that to me means actually speaking about your experience, the experience that you're having right now, the experience that you want other people to have, and not putting on the kind of corporate face of, oh, I'm a leader, I must motivate everybody and tell everybody everything's going to be okay, but saying, you know, I'm not sure and I need your help. Nothing more powerful than the leader saying to the team around him, you know what, I need your help. I need some support here. I need some advice here. Or this is going to be a difficult decision. Help me out. Or this is going to be a difficult conversation. I listened to a Simon Sinek piece where he talked about starting difficult conversations by saying, you know, I've got you here today. We're going to have a conversation. It's going to be a difficult conversation for me. I'm not sure how this conversation is going to go. I might be clumsy. I want to start with that. Let's see how this goes. I think the more honest we can be with each other, the more vulnerable we can be with each other, the more authentic we can be with each other, the more powerful our message is, and therefore the more trust we're putting in each other. Like, I am trusting you to be able to cope with me being a bit messy as a leader. I don't have to be perfect. One of the hardest things for me to learn was I don't have to be perfect. I love being perfect. My whole life is, how can I be perfect? Yet it doesn't create connection and it doesn't create trust. So how can I create trust with others? It's by sharing when I'm struggling, and it's sharing when I need support.
And there's two pieces of that as we're bringing this into a close. Like, firstly, the perfection piece. What I resent about that is it sounds like a destination piece when it comes to us and how we form. It's just like that. It's like once we get there, we're perfect, and then we just get to wake up and be perfect every day. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. Which actually piggybacks nicely into.
Speak for yourself, Steve.
Well,
obviously perfect.
And in that comment is imperfection. That's the beauty of it, right? But the second piece of this that I want to talk to, because I talk about this a lot with clients, and I've spoken about it on stages too, is this notion of authenticity. And when you actually do some research into the origin of that word and the definition of that word, it's a formative word. It's not a word of completion. It's not a word of right now and this is how I am and this is how I be. No, it's actually a formative word. It's a version of ourselves that we're forming into. It's that awareness and that acceptance of like, hey, how I am today, if I can be the best version of myself today, great. But the beauty of authenticity is that I get to try again tomorrow. I get to try again tomorrow and see if I can do it that little bit better tomorrow. And for us and for leaders, for founders, for you to be able to sit there and say, gosh, what kind of space would that be to work in for my people? To be able to create an environment where authenticity isn't just what, if you read it in the media a lot, it sounds like I get to show up and be who I want to be. It's like, that's not what authenticity is, folks. You know, authenticity is if you can create that environment in a place of work, in a business, to where someone comes in and says, however yesterday went, I get to come back in today, try again, and try to do it even better today. And that, I tell you right now, few people are going to not be excited coming into that place of work and coming into that place. And from a psychological safety standpoint, there's a big word of just like in the you know, the topics of today, but that is psychological safety at its best, is when someone can come in and say, however it went yesterday, all I know is I have a chance to come back and do it again even better today.
And I'm going to be supported in that by the people around me, be that the team, you know, the team I've created below me, or be that the people above me, or be that the people on my level. And they're going to want the best for me. And instead of judging me as like, oh, you failed yesterday, they're going to go, he tried yesterday. He attempted something yesterday. It didn't work. We're going to analyze it and we're going to do it again. And this keeps coming back to this trust, the trust of uncertainty, the trust of that I will emotionally talk about psychological safety, the trust that I will be okay, even if things don't go the way that I want them to go, or even if other people don't behave the way that I want them to, or my team doesn't do things like I want them to. And part of that first is processing that emotion, right? You get angry, you get sad, you get afraid. Processing that emotion, realizing that it exists, not trying to hide it, processing it, be that outside with friends, with colleagues, with your coach, with your therapist, and then coming back with, okay, I realized what I felt there, I realized what I've been through, now what do I want to achieve, and how do we realign ourselves, rather than I go and take my emotion out on my team, right? I'm angry, things didn't work, now I'm shouting at everybody and blaming everybody, and said, I'm going to take responsibilities for my own emotions, I'm going to deal with my anger, and I'm going to work on it, and then I'm going to go, right, what's it telling me? Okay, it's telling me that this is super important to me. Okay, that's good. Let's go back to the team. Right, this is super important to me. How can we do this better? Rather than, I'm angry, you're a failure.
Mm-hmm. That's it. And just to very much land the plane here over these two parts, this notion of how will they cope without me? We've broken it into two parts, and it's the importance of you reflecting on yourself and taking ownership for the need to recharge and just give you that space to find clarity and do things effectively as opposed to just simply show up and do. And then the second piece of this notion of how you empower the team and the importance of creating that trust in an environment to where, yes, you want folks to trust you and you want them to trust the work and you want them to trust the environment, but starts with you looking in the mirror and saying, do I trust myself? And if I don't, if I have any doubt around that, jump into the work. Don't refrain from the work. Don't resist the work. Jump into the work, because the only beneficiary is going to be those folks that you want to instill trust in around you, so you can go off, have your time away, and know that whatever this organization is you're leaving behind is thriving in your absence.
Did you want to be a pilot at one point, Steve?
I didn't, but I do use that terminology a lot. I do talk about.
I'm noticing the aviation references. I might have to start doing an aviation counter. How many times
maybe there's some stuff.
Aviation reference.
Some stuff to do in therapy there, maybe, mate. Maybe have to take a look into that. Must have been a pilot that just like didn't talk to me at some point or something like that when I was like 7, getting on a plane. All right, mate. This is fun. And one thing I have to say this before we're done, because you kind of touched on it in like this whole notion of not having it all figured out. If it ever comes across in these episodes that either you or I have it figured out and we're speaking from a place like that, I just want to make it abundantly clear that's not the case, because I've said this to a couple of folks close to me. It's like whenever I speak in a podcast or on this sort of public platform, I almost want to put in parentheses before everything I say, note to self, because what we're doing right now, we're creating accountability in this conversation. That's the beauty of this podcast, I think, is that we get to have conversations while, yes, we know and hope that we're imparting insights and wisdom and motivation for those that are listening, but we get to hold one another accountable to practicing this stuff and going back and practicing it again tomorrow, because what I've done well today, I probably won't do as well tomorrow. And that's the beauty of this work.
Yeah, I think for me, probably the only thing I've got figured out, and I wouldn't say I got it 100% figured out, is the trust that I will be okay. So if we mess this up, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to be okay, right? I'm going to finish the call. I'm going to learn from it. I'll do that a little bit differently next time, but I'm not going to die over it, and I'm not going to beat myself over it. I'm going to let it go. And I think that ability to know that you won't always be your best self, that ability to know that the only goal is curiosity. We're both very curious, and compassion for ourselves and for other people. And that's been a hard one for me. That's been a really tough one for me to learn with somebody with incredibly high standards of myself and others, is compassion, because actually that gives the room for people to take risks, including myself. And without that compassion, I can't take the risks I need to take to be brilliant, and I can't empower other people to take those risks.
And on that note, I'm trying to think of some smart aviation term. I'm not going to do it. It's beyond me right now. Mate,
we're screeching to a halt.
Screeching to a halt. Mate, this is fun. I love it. We're 4 episodes in, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'd like to believe that folks are enjoying it too. So, hey, listen, one thing. If you are enjoying the show, take a minute, click a 5th star on Apple Podcasts for us. It will be very well received and appreciated. And don't be selfish about this stuff either. Share it with your friends. Let other people know that they can be inspired, motivated, and set up for success, whether they be a founder, a leader, or wherever they may be within their journey. There's stuff here for everybody. So we appreciate you listening.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks again for listening to the show. If you like what you heard, appreciated the witty banter, and of course, appreciated the quality of the insights we provided, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating.
It helps us reach a larger audience so we can support more people just like you. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform.
There will never be a better time than now to start investing in yourself, so be sure to act upon what you took from this episode and let us know how it goes. We love hearing from our audience.
From Steve Mellor and myself, Lee Povey, thanks for listening and being you.